unreveling the problem of history, exploring African and Indian writing. So today's panel comprises Professor Anita Singh, chairperson of the Department of English at Banaras Hindu University. She received a Fulbright Nehru Visiting Scholar Fellowship for 2018 to 14 at the University of Virginia, USA. She was a fellow at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study in Shimla, India, and her recent publications are Staging Feminism, Gender, Violence, and Performance, and the two edited volumes Gender, Space, and Resistance, Women and Theatre in India, and Hero and Hero Worship, Fandom in Modern India. She is the president of the Asian African Association for Women, Gender, and Sexuality. And the second on the panel is Professor Vibha Sharma, and the third is Professor Stephen Haglison. I also welcome Professor Claudia Egro to day 2 of the GAN course. We are delighted to have you with us for today's session, which include 3 lectures. So before I begin, here are a few important points to keep in mind. Firstly, please post your questions and comments in the chat box. They will be addressed either during or at the end of the lecture. Second, based on the lectures, a 15-minute mandatory test will be conducted at the end of today's session. The test will be posted in the WhatsApp group and can be attempted until midnight. However, it will be timed and your score will be contributed to your final course certification, which is important. And lastly, your attendance duration will be recorded and the session is currently being recorded. Now to begin our session, I invite Professor Anita Singh to deliver the first lecture titled The Personal and the Political Performing Historical Women. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I guess you have not given me the permission to share my screen. I think you'll have to give me the permission to share my screen. Or if you have the PPT, you can play that.
Just give us a minute, ma'am. Just give us a minute.
Okay, sure. Take time.
You'll be able to share the screen now, ma'am, if you can check
Yeah,
it. Yes.
I can see that. So, just a minute.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay. I don't know what it is like. Let me see if.
Sure, you can take your time.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Arina, you can present. You have the PowerPoint, I think.
Yes, ma'am.
You can do that. Yeah, you can do that as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Is my screen visible right now?
Yes, it is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Is my PPT visible?
Not yet, ma'am.
Okay. So you're playing it now, right?
Yes, ma'am. Give me a minute.
So I'll stop presenting then because I guess this is not happening from my side. Is the PPT visible now?
No.
No. Okay, then
No, ma'am.
okay, then something is wrong. I think you can share that from your side.
Ma'am, actually, there's some problem with the PPT. Can you give me 2 to 3 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Technical issue while presenting the PPT.
Okay.
You can start your discussion meanwhile.
Okay. I think I can do that. I guess it's not allowing to show that screen as well. Okay. So in the meantime, I will start. Update screen image. I guess there's something wrong here. Okay. Okay. So it has been announced that the topic of my presentation. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. Okay. So if I'm not audible at any point of time, please unmute and let me know. Okay. Because once you're presenting, then you don't understand at what point there is a technical glitch.
Sure,
So the
ma'am.
topic of my presentation is personal and the political, and the subtitle then would be performing historical women. So what I'm going to do here in this 1 hour presentation is look at how history has treated women and what is this historical women that we are talking about. What exactly is history when we are talking about the very concept of history? And so I will, as a theoretical and methodological introduction, I take primarily two texts to begin with. One is Gerda Lerner's 1979 work Majority Finds Its Path, and also one more text by Lerner, which says the name is Why History Matters, Life and Thought. So these are two texts on the one side, and on the other side, I'll take up Sheila Robertson's Hidden from History, Rediscovering Women in History from 17th Century to the Present. So to begin with, what Gerda Lerner's assumptions and assertions are, she says historical scholarship, what would we, I mean, it's a well-known knowledge and understanding that historical scholarship is far from being objective or universal. Okay. Because it has always been the history that we understand has always been based on male experience. And this is what the uh, women or the feminist historians or the recent scholarship is contesting, that history has always been the preserve of a particular class or a particular sect of people, and history has to be more holistic and more egalitarian and more open to the histories of people and so on. Okay. So Gerda Lerner's again, her idea. So is my slide there now? Yeah, you're presenting it. Okay. Yeah. Can we go to the second slide? Yeah. So these are the two, as I said, text or two perspective that I'm taking up. So on the two column, you have these two perspective, and they basically talk about how do we perceive history and so on. So I started off with Gerda Lerner's concept of that history is neither universal nor objective. Then further, she says the first time when, or the initial stages when women were introduced to history, it was like as a compensatory history, or they have been left out, so let us insert them at some places here and there. And then the second phase was contribution history, that women did contribute a little bit here and there as a kind of a footnote, as a kind of a marginal note, that okay, fine, let us also include them in this the whole idea of writing history, a whole idea of understanding what history is. Then also she also talks about how women's history then largely emphasized the victimhood, their oppression. So she finally comes to the conclusion that uh, when we are talking about history, or when we are talking about autonomy for women, is uh, is when these women uh, take a position and assert their autonomy, which is not really something that is always in a position of marginality. So Lerner's feminist revisionist approach to history pose new questions about what is essentially and she's essentially existing the conversation about women in history in the new direction, which maybe as an illustration I will take up in the following slides. So then, on the other hand, if we look at Sheila Robertson's Hidden from History, so let us very briefly summarize what her basic ideas were. She also, like Gerda Lerner says, that women have always participated in history. Women were and continue to be an oppressed majority, uh, and race and class impact women's historical experience. So we need to ask new questions to elicit information about women. And then she says that when we again talk about history, so what kind of history are we talking about? histories then would include diaries, records of activities of women and other activities that women indulge in, or marginal people indulge in. So that also constitutes history. History is not like history of wars and so on. So, and also the traditional periodization of history also needs to be contested, and we need to have, a more expansive notion of what we consider to be history. Can we have the next slide? Yeah. So, very briefly, if we look at how women have been inserted or women have been seen in history in India. So, some of the very early positions that we had with regard to women's history or women in history was A.S. Altekar's The Position of Women in Hindu Civilization. So, where he basically charts the position of women in Hindu society from earliest part to maybe in the independence, post-independence period. And he asserts that women in Hindu society, basically a rightist, and he tries to assert that India was a very glorified place where women were respected and they were granted a very hallowed position and so on. And it was the various invasions that happened subsequently that the position of women kind of deteriorated. And now, after independence, we are going to regain that glorified past that we had in India. So that is the position that he takes. Although Neera Desai, a little later, 20 years later, when Neera Desai writes the history, Women in Modern India, she's slightly critical of the way women have been treated in India, and women have been, portrayed and treated in history and so on. We have Geraldine Forbes' history of women also, which is also an interesting read. Then, if we look at, if we move a little forward, so after independence, of course, our constitution granted equal rights to women and so on. So it was in the year 1974. 1975 was supposed to be the International Year of Women, and 1974, the UN had asked for an end toward equality report. And this report did create quite a lot of stir with regard to the position of women in India. And this also subsequently led to a lot of research on women, historical women, women's position in the present society, and so on and so forth. So I would say that this 1974 became a very turning point where women's historical positions of women in history were also kind of excavated, and a lot of studies were done around this time. And later, of course, we are aware of the subaltern school, Spivak's Can the Subaltern Speak, and a very powerful text by Kumkum Sangari and Sudesh, where they were talking about recasting women. And so now, of course, we have the rendering of Dalit women's testimonials, the Muslim women's history, the women history of the marginal class, and so on. So, as I said, that we are revisiting histories of other communities and castes, tribal women who participated in the freedom movement, prostitutes who participated in the freedom movement, Azizun 1857, and so on. So the notion of history has now kind of expanded and become more comprehensive and more inclusive to include different voices from women across sect, and even male and female voices that talk about different experiences. But they are more exclusive and have a kind of a diversity that was probably not there in the previous generations. Let us move to the next slide. So, having this kind of a theoretical base, so the illustrations that I will have is in three, groups. So the first group would be writing self, as I call it, historical women on stage. So here I have taken three, instances. So these three are women who have lived, and their lives have been recreated on stage. So one would say it's the biography of these women that has been recreated on stage, and they come from very diverse backgrounds. We'll look into that. So three women who have been performed on stage, whose biography has been performed on stage. One is Nati Binodini, an actor; Umrao, again, a prostitute, one would say, a singer, and so on; and Hum Mukhtara, a lady from Pakistan, and who was gang raped, and how she has been recreated in the play by Usha Ganguly. So these are three women whose biographical rendering has been done on stage on different, by different people and so on. The second slot that I have here which says Writing Nation Performing Women in Partition. So this is primarily based on the partition narratives, and it is based on Urvashi Butalia's book on partition, The Other Side of Silence. So it's about the stories of women who do not comprise the so-called protocol history. So the voices of women from the partition who were not kind of documented in history and so on in the historical records of either of these nations. Then the third, slot that I have is the personal histories. So we have a performer, Usha Ganguly, and while she's writing this autobiography, Antar Yatra is going inside. So she's talking about her own journey. She is historicizing her own life. So these are three ways in which her stories or the stories of women have been told. So can we go to the next slide? So the first play that I take up is Nati Binodini. So this play is actually based on the autobiography of Binodini Dasi, and she wrote her autobiography in Bengali, which was called as Amar Jibon or Amar Abhinetri Jibon. Two autobiographies. They have been rehashed into this play that is performed at several places. So this was directed by Amal Alana, and the play, as I said, is based on this performer Binodni Dasi, and she was born 18. So she was on stage only from the age of 12 to 23. So her span of being a performer was quite limited, and she comes from the background. She belongs to that family of performers which were not who were not so respected around that time, and she was quite a wonderful performer and very well known on the Kolkata stage. And her mentor was Girish Ghosh, who was a very well known performer at that time. And then they did not have a proper stage around that time. So it was Binodini who asked, who got this money to build up this stage in Kolkata. That was called so they wanted a stage, so she got this money from Gurmukh Rai, a wealthy Marwadi merchant. And so this merchant gave the money to Binodini so that this theater house would be built. But then he had this condition that this theater house should be named after Binodni's name. That is, it should be called B Theatre or something like that. But once the theater house was built, so they did not name it after Binodini because they thought that naming it after a prostitute slash actress would be defaming the entire theater. It would not be a good move. People maybe would not come to the theater houses and so on. So this theater was later called the Star Theater and not the B Theater. And now, after so many years, very recently, it was again renamed as the B Theater. Now, how does Amal Alana perform this life of Binodni Dasi on stage? So she has almost five Binodinis on stage, and they are there at different stages of her life, and they talk about their experiences of how they were, not treated so well despite putting their efforts on stage and so on, and how how Binodini was discriminated against. So she portrays the life of Binodini by having these five performers moving in and out of stage. Can we have the next slide, please? Yes. So you can see that there are five people, and then this Binodni always is shown having a lotus in her hand. So lotus signifies purity. So despite being she's entirely in a male world where her talent or her contribution to theater is not recognized. And finally, then after the age of 23, when she realizes that her past is something that is more important to the people around her. So she leaves the theater and she joins Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's group and so on. So this whole performance of Binodni's life is very powerfully done through five different characters impersonating Binodni at different stages of the life and bringing multiple perspectives. So this is a kind of a staging device that Amal Alana has used to project the life of Binodni Dasi on stage. So can we go to the other slide? To the next slide, please? Yes. So the next play that I will take up is Umrao. So we know Umrao was a person who was a performer, and she she had she was very popular, and a lot movies and other things have been made on her life. There's a novel also based on her life. So this is a play written by Gitanjali Shri, and so how the performance of this play is, there are two writers on the stage. So this is the life of a performer, Umrao Jan Ada, and how is it produced on stage? How is her life recreated on stage? So there are two writers. One is a traditional writer, and the other is a modern writer. Gitanjali Shri, for instance, it is the modern writer who looks at Umrao's life from a very first fresh perspective. So the traditional writer portrays the life of Umrao, and shows how, when she is in her youth and how popular she is, how she has so many followers and so on. And at the end of her life, she's kind of repentant. She gives a message out to the people that, okay, my life was what it was, and I would not advise you to go my way. The life of a singer or the life of a performer is rife with, difficulties. And, my life has been a bit of an immoral life. And the advice to people who watch my life or who read about me is that they should not follow my life. So this is the traditional take on Umrao. Now, the modern writer, which is Gitanjali Shri, looks at Umrao's life from a very different perspective. She says uh, Umrao says that, okay, fine, this has been my life, and I had been very popular, and people loved me, and people showered gifts on me, and so on. And now that I'm getting old, so she says, "Ab मैं करवट बदलती हूँ." Now I'll have a different life altogether. So there's no repentance, there's no remorse of what she has done in her life. There is acceptance of what she has done and a celebration of her life. So there's this twist in two versions that the performer does on stage, that the writer does on stage. That this was the traditional perspective, but a modern historian looks at it from a different perspective. So this traditional perspective was a kind of a normative view, that this is what it should have been. A dancing woman should not be really valorized and so on. But the modern view is that, fine, I mean, she lived her life. There's no remorse, and she's happy with what she has achieved in life. And now she wants to move on with her life. So can we move to the next slide? I think I have a small clipping also, if we can show that. Oh, okay. We'll come to that clipping a little later. So the third play that I take up is Hum Muktara. Now, this play was written and performed around the time when Nirbhaya's event happened. We are all familiar with Nirbhaya. 2012, when Nirbhaya was gang raped. So Usha Ganguly takes up the case of Muktara Mai from Pakistan. And Muktara Mai was a woman who was gang raped by the men from a different community as a kind of a kind of a revenge. It was a kind of a revenge rape and so on. So now, after this revenge rape, Muktara Mai goes to court, and she fights her case, and she wins it also partially. And then in her later in her life, she opens up an NGO for women, for women's education and so on. And then she writes her memoir. Then she writes her autobiography about the kind of life that she has lived. So Usha Ganguly borrows this memoir of Muktara Mai, and she performs it on stage post Nirbhaya, to show how the victimhood for a woman is not enough, how women can rise above and assert their agency and so on. So here you have, the entire play is performed by a group of women who wear a typical kind of a cloth, a similar kind of a cloth, and they move around the stage with vigor, a lot of vigor. So when we see the play, there's a lot of power that is displayed on stage, and you can see the lines that the performer speaks out, sings out towards the end. And it says, "Na banengi hum मोम की बत्तियां, बनेंगी हम धधकते मिशाले, एक बार नजर उठाओ, उधर देखो, hum muktara, sab muktara." So basically, she universalizes Muktara Mai's condition. And she says that despite whatever, has happened, we will rise above that. So there's a kind of a very positive, universalistic kind of a message that Muktara Mai's performance on stage tries to project. Can we move to the next slide? I think here we have a slide. Okay, can we play that? Can you click on that? If you can click on that, the previous one, or let us move ahead. Okay, so I guess we have 15 minutes more to go. So we'll leave
Yes,
some time for questions as well.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. So we'll just wind it up, and if possible, we can have these clippings. So we'll move to the next slide. With skipping, we can come back later, or if you can share the slide with the participants, they can watch this clipping. So can we
Yes, ma'am.
move to
Sure.
yeah? Can we move to the next one? So we have this is Aur Kitne Tukde. Now the second one, the second slot that I said, the first slot was women, three women, and who have been there, and how are their lives recreated on stage. So the first I had taken up was Binodni Dasi. The second one was Umrao Janada. The third one was Muktara Mai. And how these performers and how these directors or stage artists have recreated their life on stage, and the recreation has been something as someone as being very powerful. They have agency, which the probably the history has denied, or which probably the history has overlooked or not emphasized. And what the history has emphasized all along was their kind of victimhood and so on. So next, the second slot that was that I said, women during partition. So here, this play is based on you know uh, Urvashi Butalia's Or Kitne, the other side of silent, and the play that B. Gauri finally writes, and the director is Kirti Jain, is Or Kitne Tukde. Now there are four fragments that four documentaries, one would say, or four lives that the play kind of displays. It is Sadia, Zainab, Vimla, and Harnam Kaur. And each of these, women speak about how the partition has been so unfair to them, how they have been they have been rejected. Either they were kidnapped from India to Pakistan. So she talks about Sadia. So she's kidnapped from India to Pakistan and renamed as, this girl has been renamed as Sadia. And then again, when there was this peace and the restoration of women from both the countries happened, so Sadia was not accepted back in her country. And then she gets very fed up and she says, I'm not going anywhere. So it explains the plight of the women during the partition. So we have Harnam Kaur, who is gang raped during the partition, and she's alive after the partition and after the gang rape. So her son every day kind of taunts her that why are you still living, and it is so painful for him to see his mother living despite being gang raped. And he tells her that why don't you also commit suicide and so on. So Harnam Kaur also lives on. So here you have stories of women who have lived on with their traumatic experience, who have learned to live on with their traumatic experience. So it's the agency of these women that this play tries to demonstrate. So, so can we move to the last slide, please? Again, there was this clipping. I will leave that. We can play that a little later if possible. So, okay, not Azizun. Also, I will leave. Can we move to the again? This is a clipping here. So Azizun was a courtesan from Kanpur, and she participated in the 1857 revolt. And this is a play written by what's her name? It's a play written by I'm forgetting her name. Okay, let's move further. Next, okay, Tripurari Sharma. Sorry, Tripurari Sharma, and it's a very powerful play. If we can play that slide later, let's move on to the last one. Last slide, right? So the third slot that I had was women's own history. Women's own history is also important. So that also comprises one every woman her own historian. So this is Usha Ganguly's play Antar Yatra, and in Antara Yatra, of course, it is her own life that she documents. So there's this the her traditional in a traditional dramatic structure. We have a beginning, middle, and end, and all that. So it's her autobiographical voice, or it is her own voice that she's trying to project. So the stage, setting is very different. It's an entire huge stage, that is stage space, that is bare, and she has that structures. You can see the oval structure, the round structure, the geometrical structures on stage. They all represents the cosmic world, her own world, and so on. So so the whole idea of the huge stage with no props signify a kind of an unboxed kind of a stage, and so on. And she starts by her early childhood and the series of oppression and the ways that she has looked at her own oppressions in her life, that she documents in the play. So this whole play becomes a documentation of the way that she has received the experiences, that she has evaluated her experiences in her life. She has lived those experiences, and she has moved on with those experiences. She has become a person who has gained from these experiences that she has lived in her life. So she is basically looking at her own life from a kind of a different perspective, and trying to analyze how these experiences have made her the kind of woman that she is now. So that is it. And if we can play some clipping, if not, we can just take up questions. I guess this is all. uh,
Okay, ma'am. So, ma'am, can we
yeah,
play the video?
if you can, maybe one or two videos if you can play.
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah. But these videos may not play because the
Ma'am, we will try.
you try, because they may not play. But I mean, you can try this one
Yes,
probably.
ma'am, we are trying.
Although for anyone who's interested, I have given the YouTube link. The entire play is, yeah, I can see that it is playing, although there's no sound. So you can see the entire play with this link, the YouTube link that is present here. And even with Umrao, the link that is present here.
Ma'am, we will share the link.
Yeah, you can share the link later.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay, so we have a couple of minutes and we can take some questions with this. Maybe Azizun's link may not also work here. So this is Tripurari Sharma talking about her play. Maybe there's no sound.
Yes, ma'am, there's some sound
Yes,
issue.
yes, yes, yes. Okay, I think these were the two clippings that I had. Okay, so we can take some questions if possible,
Yes, ma'am.
if there are any questions.
Thank you, ma'am, for your insightful lecture
Okay,
on the
thank
personal
you.
and the political performing historical
Yeah.
women. And now participants can drop their queries in the chat box.
I can't see any question here.
Yes, ma'am, we will wait for a few minutes more.
Yeah, okay. We'll wait for them.
I met you know Ganguly in her last days, and
Yes.
she was, she was to she was to visit my university because we had collaborated, and then I had talked her a long discussions we used to have about her performance. So it's a very interesting discussion.
Mhm.
The participants should have a lot of questions.
Mhm.
I can ask. I want to ask one or two things.
Sure.
Like how do you place, because you the entire discussion, the paper that you have presented here, it seeks to correlate the performance based on women and written by women as contexts of history. Now, do you think that if they had not been plays, or if they had not been performances, that had been different, the impact or their receiving or their contribution would have been different if these were novels. Like I'm reminded of Amrita Pritam's novel, where the same kind of story is there, where what's the name, that the famous novel in which there's this based on partition, with women who were raped in partition period. They were they were then returned to their homes,
Yes,
and
yes.
then the society was not able to accept them back.
Correct.
So that was like,
Mhm.
what is the role of performance in this storytelling and historicizing?
Performance again is becomes a medium to tell stories, and these performance, the like yeah, Pinjar by Amrita Pritam. Perfect. Yes, right. So, novel no, or fictional work is read by people. Performance has a more, one would say, a powerful way of, getting to people. And performance has a very, as I said, a very powerful immediacy of effect. It has a powerful immediacy of effect. So when this play is performed, or Kitne Tukde, it has a very beautiful, and I would say a very compelling kind of image, and compelling kind of story that has been told. So you have, so all women, all these four women stories, four women on stage, and the light falls on one woman, and she narrates a story. So you get a kind of a kaleidoscopic kind of an effect, and the effect of pain is more magnified, I would say. So every medium, whether it is fictional work, it has a different appeal. A poetry has a different appeal, and a performative event has a very different appeal. So the I would say it's the medium that you're using has the message. It has it has its own appeal. So and
Yes,
a performance is sculpted in a very different way. The story is told in a very different way, whereas a narrative would have a very different detailed storytelling method. So here you have visuality that comes out very powerfully, and how do you within a certain span of time convey your story. So that's the power of image, the power of symbols, the power of storytelling, music, which is all music, song, dance, and everything is used in Aur Kitne Tukde. That is what that makes the story telling more powerful.
exactly. I wanted to
Yes,
highlight this aspect, that performance
yes.
has its own method of documenting
Own
history.
vocabulary. It has its own
It
vocabulary.
has its own grammar, it has its own
Yeah, it has its
jargon,
own grammar. Right, right.
and that documents history in a very different way.
Huh.
And
Mm.
there is another performance that I'm reminded of. Uh,
Mm.
I've written a couple of papers on this. It's by Lisa Ghazi,
Okay.
who's a Bangladeshi
Okay.
origin, who was living in United Kingdom. She lives in
Okay.
England,
Okay.
and
I haven't gone through a play. What's this play about?
this play, the play that she performs is about the Virangana of Bangladesh,
Okay. Okay.
war widows of
Mhm,
1971.
mhm, mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
to give some perspective to, some context to the students who do not know about this, the 1971 war, the independence war of Bangladesh, was in news recently when there was problem in Bangladesh.
Mhm, mhm,
So during this war, various thousands of women were raped by the army, the
mhm,
Pakistani army, and they were raped as a under a program to pollute the so-called pollution required to you know uh, stigmatize women. It was used as a tool, and these women were called after the independence Virangana. The Bangladesh
Viranganas.
government had given this title to them, Virangana, and many of them had returned to their houses, to their homes, Many could not find their people alive. But then there is, like, like freedom fighters get a pension or financial support, and so there is a lot of politics around it. Now, in this play, what she does is, Lisa Ghazi, that she meets, before the play, she did a lot of groundwork, and she meets Virangana women living in Bangladesh. She visits them, she talks to them, she records their interviews, and then she performs this play on stage. She herself performs, and she invites some of them to watch that play who could muster up the courage to be the audience. And after the play, the kind of scenes that erupted in the hall, women crying and sharing their stories, and uh, loving Lisa Ghazi for being their storyteller. And they said that we could never tell this pain to the world,
Mm.
because we did not have this performance as a medium, the visual medium that you provided. They said it in their own ways. I'm just putting it very simply,
Mhm.
rooted way. So this is very important. That it's not always a long passages
Mhm.
of words and paragraphs that are important. It's some pictures, it's some actions, it's some visuals. They speak 1,000 words, they say 1,000 emotions. And that's what performance does to documentation of history, or historicizing a particular action which has gone unnoticed. So this is something very interesting. I'm sure people
Yeah.
should be able to say something here.
So Yale, when this Nirbhaya event happened, so Yale Faber, after this Nirbhaya event, of course, Usha Ganguly did this Hamuktara. Yale Faber had, everyone was moved by this event. So she put out on the Facebook that people who have had similar experiences, they can share. And she decided to weave a play out of this. And many women came up, through her Facebook, post, and they said that we are ready to share the experience. So she wove the entire, play Nirbhaya out of the lived experiences of women. And so it's a very beautiful play. Again, it's available on YouTube. You can watch that. So do we have Vandana Sharma who has raised her hand?
You know, Vanna, Professor Vanna from.
Vandana, ayo, Vandana, yes, I know Vandana, but you are muted.
Please unmute Professor Vanna.
Yeah,
Yes.
Namaskar. Evening, ma'am. Good to see
Good
you after
evening. Yeah, good to see you
very
after a long time.
yeah. And
Yes.
I was, just reflecting over, like, when you were mentioning about the
Yes.
performative arts and performative,
Yes.
plays. To add to it, I was recalled of the folklore here in Jammu, the Duggar folklore,
Yes. Yes.
where we have,
Mm.
such kind of narratives which have
Mm-hmm.
been portrayed by the various theatres, wherein the agency of
Mm-hmm.
it has been, portrayed in a
Yeah.
very sharp light. Gumai
Yes.
is one such. Gumai is one such.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
Uh,
Right. I
so
think
that,
there is a question also.
Yes,
So
yes,
it's a
ma'am.
huge one. Yeah. How can historians and researchers effectively integrate women's narrative into mainstream history without reinforcing the victimization? Someone asked this question in WhatsApp group. Okay, so that's what I mean. If you look at Hamuktara or the Krithna Tukre, they all kind of downplaying the victimization thing, that women are always already oppressed, the kind of an idea. The kind of an idea women are already oppressed. So when Nirbhaya happened, there was huge hue and cry and all that. So Usha Ganguly decided to take up this event but present it in a very powerful way. So these women on stage, they make very vigorous movement, they make very powerful movements, they dance on stage, and they have these candles and mashals holding in their hands. So the whole image and the symbolism of the play that comes across is that of power, of energy, of agency. So not just the victimization. So victimization is there, but somehow it is overpowered and downplayed by the power of the image, but and the power, the collective. So it's not a single woman on stage. So you have this whole women, a kind of a collective. So it's a kind of a collective that is kind of portrayed on the play. So they try to kind of do not reinforce the victimization framework, but emphasize more on the agency framework. So fine, if there is a discrimination or there is an oppression or there is a victimization that has happened, we move beyond it. We are too powerful to be overpowered by this event and so on. Then the next is, since you mentioned Aur Kitne Tukde, I was reminded of Dastan, a serial based on the novel Banno by Razia Bhatt, which led me to this question. How would you interpret a writer's portrayal of partition through a female character, particularly in terms of integrating women's narrative into mainstream history and eventual literature, especially considering that we have largely read partition literature and history from male perspective? I think this is a question that we have addressed, time and again. So who is mainstream now? I mean, again, the whole question of mainstream. What is mainstream? Who's mainstream? So, which perspective are you looking from? So, a marginal perspective is very powerful, because from a margin, you can see what you cannot see from the mainstream. So, mainstream is a question of perspective. So, it has, as I said, this question has long been addressed by many critics, by many scholars. So we have these voices that are coming up, and we are listening to these voices, because they are adding fresh perspective to a kind of a protocol history that we have been reading. So as I said, this is not something new, but we have been attuned to that. We have been addressing this issue for a very long time. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. So
Okay.
that's what I
Okay.
think.
Okay.
So
Ma'am, I have
thanks.
a question to ask.
Yeah, sure.
May I?
Please, please,
Uh,
please.
First of all, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Uh, I would like to ask
Thank
you
you.
one thing. Keeping in
Yeah, sure.
view the
Yeah.
corporeal presence of
Uh, uh,
body on a stage,
uh, mm,
especially the with reference to the
uh,
plays that you talked about.
yes.
And there is also one play which I recently came to know about,
Mm,
which is Janeman by Machinder More, which
okay.
is about the
Okay.
transgenders, right?
Okay. Okay.
So,
Okay.
like when you see the performance of body on a stage,
Yeah.
is it historicizing the body or dehistoricizing the body, or is it both? Uh, I'm a bit confused about this.
What do you mean when you said
Like
historicizing the
when you say
body?
historicizing the body, I think
Uh,
cinema, fiction, short
uh,
story, poetry is able
uh,
to do that properly. But
uh,
when you are enacting a play on stage,
uh,
the
uh,
body, which is
uh,
the performance which is taking place in real time,
uh,
there's some sort of dehistoricizing, like the
uh,
body, it separates itself from the historical context, and something more viable, something more apparent becomes alive, right? So, and I think when I saw the film, there was a film which was based on some scenes of the play from the play Janeman by Machinder More. It was digestible when I watched the film, but if you watch the play on stage,
Play. It has a
it
different
becomes very
meaning
disturbing.
altogether.
It becomes very disturbing.
Yes, yes. So actually, theater has, like Professor Vebha was talking about, how does a narrative, approach a story, and how does a poem approach a story, or how does a play approach a story. So bodies become very powerful on stage. So the corporeal presence, as you were talking about, is a message by itself, has a meaning by itself. So if you look at, as I said, Hum Muktara has a very wonderful play. And, I mean, I would only take up Ushaga. I haven't watched that particular play that you're talking about. Uh, but I mean, I juxtapose two plays by Usha Ganguly, Hum Muktara and Antar Yatra. So Antar Yatra is about herself, and she's all alone on the stage for 50 minutes. She performs all alone. So that body on stage, that corporeal presence, that lone presence gives a lot of meaning and power to what she's performing. On the other hand, when she's performing Hum Muktara, she does not use a single woman, but she uses a whole lot of repertoire of women, whole lot of, collective women collective. And the purpose is to give that body that power that was, taken away from that particular body in a particular historical context. That is the context of Nirbhaya. So the purpose of having so many bodies moving briskly on stage, with their, the lehengas that they wore, they swirl on stage. So it's not just the body, it is the attire, the sartorial symbolism on stage also becomes a very powerful metaphor. And the light and the colors that she has used, they all contribute to the kind of power that she wants to, the agency that she wants to present on stage, that has been diminished or that has been taken away from that particular context that she is referring to on stage. So that way, when we see a play that, as you said, it is disturbing, it elicits a different kind of a response than, as you said, reading a novel or a short story or some other medium would do. Okay. So is
Thank
that,
you so much.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am and sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we now move on to our next lecture by Professor Vibha Sharma titled Mapping the Historicity in Contemporary Indian Writing. Over to you, ma'am.
Before that, I would like to thank Professor Anita Singh for joining us, for sparing her valuable time. I know that it is very difficult for a person sitting in the chair of a department's head to take out time, and despite that, she joined us, and she always is always there to help us out in matters of research scholars and everything. So I'm very, very indebted to her. It was absolutely a very interesting and a very valuable addition. The topics that you brought in this course, I'm sure the participants have benefited from that. Thank you very much, Professor Anita
Thank you
Singh,
so
for
much.
being
Thank
with
you so
us.
much. Thank you so much.